was we were trying to change the direction of culture in these cities. You put enough impacting churches in a city, we believe that you can change crime rates, lower them. You can raise literacy rates. You can just change the spiritual tone and spiritual climate in individual people, and then if you do it on a broad enough scale throughout the whole community. And we wanted to do that materially all over the United States. And we've also decided, with the work that Bob is doing and others in our organization, we're now partnering across the globe with pastors all over the world to do the same thing. And so I'm very excited about how that is a major focus today. And I can tell you my mom and dad are very pleased that we've moved to do some of those in addition to what I do at Disney. And that has been bringing me great joy as we go forward. But you know what? They can live in harmony with each other, your business life and your spiritual life together, even in a big corporation. And Disney, I can tell you, is a secular company. It is not a Christian-based company. There are decisions that get made in that company that I don't agree with as a Christian, but you know what? You learn how to maneuver in an organization in a company like that. Let me give you one example that has happened over the years. When we were building our first cruise ships, we designed them casino gambling on board them. And I went to Michael Eisner at the time. He was the CEO of the company. I said, Michael, I don't believe we should have casino gambling on board these cruise ships. And he said, well, why not? And I said, well, because it's a family market, and they're not going to appreciate the casino gambling that's on these ships. Every other ship in the world has that, and we were designed that way. He also asked me another question, how much will that cost? And I said, well, it's about $60 million. It was a pretty short first meeting with Michael. But I went back a couple other times to really try to say to Michael, look, we're making progress against this. And finally I went back after 4 or 5 meetings with Michael. I said, Michael, we've gotten this down to about a $15 or $20 million reduction in revenue. And I said, I will guarantee you that we will make as much money on these cruise ships as we would with casino gambling without casino gambling. And he says, you know what, if you're going to guarantee that, I'm going to take that. And we built them without casino gambling. Today, they're the most profitable cruise ships that exist in the world today. And about a year later, Michael came back and said, wasn't that a great decision that he made about not putting casino gambling on board the ships? So there are ways of impacting things as you do move forward. Let me close by telling you about a movie that's coming out in December. And I am very excited about this movie. The producer of this movie is a great friend of mine. But the author of this series of books is probably one that is very familiar to every one of you. His name is C.S. Lewis. How many of you have heard of C.S. Lewis? Yeah, I thought most of you would know who he was. And he wrote a series called the Narnia series. And it's interesting because the first movie that came out in this series after the book was written was The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. And Disney actually distributed that movie. It had great success worldwide. The second movie Disney distributed also. The third one is being distributed by another company, and this is the one that's coming out in December. It's called The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. And The Voyage of the Dawn Treader continues the theme of the power of God that was represented by Aslan and faith, and how those work together, and how they're integrated together. And let me give you just a little bit of the story of it. The story is not the important thing. The important thing is how Aslan, representing God, really does make a difference in people's lives. But it's about 3 children, Lucy, Edmund, and their cousin Eustace. And they're spending a holiday together. And they are unexpectedly drawn into the world of Narnia. And they're rescued by this ship called the Dawn Treader. And on the journey, the captain of the ship is King Caspian. And their goal in life is to go out and find the 7 lost lands of Narnia. And the reason they're doing that is because they had promised Aslan that that's what they were going to do. And so, when you think about the people in this story, one of those in particular, Eustace, he was a troublemaker as a child, and he was very hard-headed. He actually talked about this in the movie, about having dragon thoughts all the time, very negative thoughts. And he actually became a dragon in this movie. And he felt really bad about it because he would mistreat people, he would really do bad things, and he felt really bad, he felt really isolated. And he didn't want to be this dragon, he didn't want to be this guy that he had become. But you know what, as he tried to pull that dragon suit off, or those scales off of himself, he could not do it. And he tried, and he tried, and he tried. And he ultimately realized this one thing, that only Aslan can do this. Only Christ can undragon someone. And I think that is so impactful when you think about it that way. And the movie is a great movie. You'll want to go see it. But what I want to do is I want to give you a local example also right here in Texas of someone who has seen something very similar in their life. How many of you know a Texas Ranger baseball player called Josh Hamilton? Yeah, he's a good guy, isn't he? Well, let me tell you a little bit of a story about Josh. A few years ago, he was actually out of baseball. And his life was in the pits. He was in the tank. He was into many, many addictions. And his life was over for all intents and purposes. His life was so bad that he didn't have a place to live. And he actually had to go live with his grandmother. That was a place of last resort for him. Well, what happened when he was living with his grandmother, she introduced him to this Jesus. And he received that as his into his personal life in a very powerful way. And it really helped turn his life around. And today, you all were cheering for Josh because he may be the most valuable player of the American League this year, and he led the Texas Rangers to the World Series. Not a great outcome in the World Series, but he led them there anyway, and that's a big feat that he had. And so he had taken a life that was just like Eustace, down and out, and it got turned around. And that's something that I think can happen as a result of this relationship that you can have. And so I think it's something that, when you think about it that way, God is really bigger than all these problems of the world that we're describing. And only God can undragon the world that we're talking about and that we're looking at. And I want to close by really talking a little bit of an interaction that Aslan had with Lucy, one of the characters in this movie. And here's what it said. "Welcome, child," he said. "Aslan," said Lucy, "you're bigger." "This is because you're older, little one," he answered. "Not because you are?" "I am not. But every year you grow, you will find me bigger." So I want to leave you with that today. Thank you for your time. I really enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of your faith journey.